We're going to start with a word of prayer, but we want to start with some prayer requests before we do. I don't know that we had a chance to even mention Pastor Nelson, did we?
We did not.
Pastor Nelson last week, towards the end of last week, I believe, was at the hospital with blood clots in his lungs. And he was there for a number of days on the, what is that, heparin, I think, sounds right?
Right.
And it sounds like he's home today. So he's home, but obviously still on blood thinners and working out all those details. And so continue to pray for Pastor Nelson. And then as well, Elsie Lynn. So the last pastor, David Lynn, his mom, and Elsie used to be here. In fact, they sat right there, second row on the end.
And she'd play the organ.
And she played the organ. She was just diagnosed with, what did I say? Leukemia. And it's to the point that they've called in hospice. And so certainly be praying for the Lynns. And there's 3 sons?
Yes.
3 sons? Or 2 sons
Jim?
and a daughter?
Yeah, that
2 sons and a daughter. And I think they're a very close family, so I'm certain that this is impacting all of them.
2 sons and a daughter.
So certainly be in prayer for the Lynns. I don't know any other details. It was just a email blast from the AIBCI for them. And so be praying for Mrs. Lynn. Do we have any others? We mentioned the Clarks last week. If you recall, they're in China. They had a respiratory flu, whatever that is. And the baby, one of the 2 little ones, I don't know which one it is in the spectrum, had the eardrum blue. All but 2 of them are better, back to perfect health, or better, full health, I think is what he said. 2 of them are still working on some snotty noses and coughs. And the one with the eardrum issue has 3 more days on the eardrops. And the one ear is completely better, the other ear seems to be getting better, so that's a praise. And certainly that could have been a lot worse, especially with a little one. It sounds like the horizon is near getting her back to full health as well. Any others?
Not specific, but I was just going to ask prayer for my mom.
Oh.
I probably won't put this on it's not like she's taking care of her youngest grandson while Abby cannot. And my dad's going to be gone for 2 weeks, and it's just exhausting. And this little guy's he's got a lot of energy, and so I just asked for some prayers. She was saying, with the Lord's strength, I can do this, but it just would be nice. Her name's Linda, and if you think of just praying for her, there's just a lot there, and
Yes.
she's a grandma, and there's a lot of mom work going on right now, so.
Yes. Our little Josiah has got plenty of energy, but this little guy is one that you literally take your eyes off of him for 30 seconds and he's into something.
Yes.
And so this is constant hands-on. Wear the grandma completely out every day.
My mom wrote recently that like something's in her garden, like pulling up her whatever, and my sister, so his aunt said, "Are you sure it's not Riley?" That's not really funny, but it's just to prove that my mom has her hands full right
Yes.
now.
Yes. Saw Joe before.
And the Harmony Baptist in Galesburg, their youth pastor and his wife just lost their baby. He went in for the 37-week checkup and had to find a heart.
37.
37 weeks.
Wow.
They had a visitation and funeral for her on Tuesday for the baby, Catherine. His name is TJ Mackling and her name is Haley.
Haley.
She's also a preschool teacher at the school.
Two daughters still at
Yes.
dramatizing in the musical camp. They get their phones taken away for the week, and so we don't get any updates, but Marinette has been really good at posting pictures, and so we've had girl spottings, daughter goofy spottings, I think. Some great pictures of both of them, and so they look like they're having a good time. They look like they're still healthy and still smiling. We dropped them off on Monday. Caitlin, her thing started before Rebecca's did, so we kind of hung out with Rebecca. It was like a half hour earlier than what Rebecca's would be. And so we hung out with Rebecca and made sure she was all settled in, and they played some games with Josiah, and then they had their first everybody together meeting in the gymnasium, and so we went in there to catch Caitlin and say goodbye and all that, and the first words that Dr. Ledgerwood, the main music guy there on campus, said to the whole group of high schoolers is, "I hope you guys are all well rested, because we firmly believe that you should not sleep this week. You can do that on the weekends." Which to a bunch of high schoolers, they all applauded. They thought that was wonderful. Well, I know I said it on Sunday. It is I cannot believe what they accomplished in 1 week there. It's unbelievable, but it is a lot of work, and I bet there is very little sleep that happens this week. But continue to pray for, if you think of it, our 2 daughters, and a couple of days left of that camp there at Marinette. Anybody else? Yes.
Ed hurt his back this week.
Oh.
Hauling too many hay bales. Not as young as he used to be, but he thinks he can still do it all. So he's up and around, but he's moving really slow.
Yes. You got all of ours, right? Seems that way. All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, we thank you again for all that you've done for us. We do thank you that you are aware of our needs. I do pray that you would give us the grace, the strength, the patience, the endurance that is necessary, often when we are facing circumstances, and certainly those that are going through them as well. Certainly do pray for mother-in-law as she's just got a little extra on her plate now. And I pray that you give her the strength and the endurance that she needs. But as well, that even make progress with Riley and perhaps changing her temperament and all that's involved there. I just pray that you give direction, wisdom, and certainly the energy that is necessary. And I just pray that this time frame would go quickly. I certainly do pray for Elsie Lynn as well with this recent diagnosis of leukemia, and seemingly seems pretty severe at this point, with hospice being involved. I just pray that you would give that grace to that entire family, which we know that you will, but I pray that they be able to sense it, be able to wait on you, and even rejoice in you. And I pray that you be with Al, certainly, as he's goes through this with his wife, and Dave and Jim, and I don't remember the daughter's name, as they certainly, and their families all deal with this as well. I just pray that you would give them just the focus and the energy that is necessary in the road that is yet ahead of them. So we do pray for this youth pastor and his wife there at Harmony, as they're dealing with the loss of this little one. Certainly tragic in human terms. We thank you that you are able to turn tragedy into triumph, and I do pray that there would be this victory even in the lives of others, perhaps extended family, and even in their church family as a result. And I just ask that you give them just your very presence during this time as they move forward and say goodbye to this little one that they never got to hold. And I just pray as well that you be with Pastor Nelson as he is recovering from these blood clots in his lungs. I pray that you give him the rest that he needs, but as well the return to health, and that he be able to get back to breathing comfortably again and moving forward in all that's involved there as well. And I just ask that you would certainly direct there as well. And do ask that you be with Ed with his back injury, and I just pray that you give him the rest, the comfort that is needed to rest, and just on all the routines and expectations of his day, that he'd be able to have the endurance and just continue marching through, and that you bring just the healing that is necessary for that as well. For the other requests, certainly that we've prayed for in the past, certainly do pray for the Miller family, John and Sharon, as they're dealing with different health needs. I just ask that you give them the strength, the health, and as well just the patience as they work this on their way through this, and as well for the rest of us that have different needs that perhaps we have shared, some that we haven't. I just ask that you would direct and guide as only you can, so that only you would be glorified. And we thank you for what you will do. In Jesus' name, amen. As far as some announcements, Sunday is Father's Day, and so perhaps some extras back here, perhaps in the Sunday school time frame, and a message on dads, and then no meal or service. Hopefully you all still have a meal, but no afternoon or evening service on Sunday. And then we continue on with our menu. It's our bulletin for the weeks thereafter. Still to determine, and we can do this as we get a little closer, but it's only a few weeks away now. That will be to July 3rd. And I guess it's just a matter of who all will still be around and not heading elsewhere with family or friends or whatever will be taking place. But if there's attendance, we'd like to have a service if that's the case. If not, we'll figure something else out. That'll be here very quickly. I can't believe we're already looking into July, yes. So anything else that you need to bring up?
No, I haven't heard back from Princeville, so we haven't changed the nursing home yet.
Yes. So at this point we will be...
I'm sure we can. I'll just call the nursing home next, and they have a few open dates, so I could just switch with them.
So we'll see how that all works out. It'd be funny to get the week that they're actually going to be here, or scheduled to be here.
Swap it.
They come here, and then we go there the same day.
Could they come here the week that Reverend Bob's here? Can I swap that? Because you'll be preaching in the morning service.
That's true. Have them come here that week, and then we'll go there.
The very next week.
It is the next week.
We'll talk about it.
Yes.
Quick question.
Yes.
You want me to swap out getting those things that Ed was gonna get if his back is on?
Oh. Well, there isn't,
We can buy us some glue in there.
and there isn't a rush because they're not on sale this week.
Oh.
So, I mean, it's obviously up to him, but there's at least the 11% comes, seems frequently enough at Menards if you wanted to wait for that, or when they actually are on a sale. But no rush on my end. Mary may want them yesterday, but
Whenever they're on sale and
yeah,
rebate or whatever.
seems like that rebate.
Mhm.
For a while then, it seemed like it was almost every other week. I haven't paid attention enough. That still goes on. So it could be next week already. They're on sale.
Probably depends upon what kind of discounts on stuff they get. If they don't have enough to put on sale, they do the 11%, I guess. I don't know.
That could be, yeah, just to get people in the door.
Mhm.
Do we have these handed out? Everybody have? Quickly go over this. Hot off the presses, I believe.
This afternoon.
Well, there you go.
I had them ready last week and totally forgot to print them, so I blew it.
There you go. Let's go over this here quickly and let me know if you have any questions. But again, because we don't have regular deacons meetings, we just want to go over this as a whole. And I think it's good as well anyway, especially since we're a small church, why not? But the first page, balance sheet, gives you the first column is the end of May compared to the end of April. Definitely down some. Building fund is right on, no changes there. General account drops some, and this obviously the general account goes like this every week. It goes up and down, and so it depends on where that all falls. Missions account went down some, but doing well. In fact, I guess we haven't taken a Love Wednesday offering in a while either.
Oh, true.
So we're doing very well there. Savings didn't change as well. Second page are a list of who got what. Again, obviously Amarin, myself, Baptist Mid, Mumfords, correct? I think it's Mumfords.
Yeah.
Baptist World is Sharon Clark. Blue Cross is Health And we have, we have the two again, Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. One I think is 3131 is dental for one person, for us maybe, and then the rest must be, Bobby Villette was a missionary that we had last month, City of Toulon Water, Concerned Christian Americans, the Reverend Bob, Frontiers, our phone and the internet, GFA is the Winches, New Testament Baptist Church is the Bergs, and Sam's Club is the kids, health insurance, and obviously a few other things.
Yeah, I think in this case it had to do with Mother's Day, a lot of it.
Yes, Mother's Day things that we bought. Next page, probably the next two pages, the last two pages
Yeah.
are the, in contrast to the budget. Obviously, budgeted higher for the general fund than we have been doing so far this year. Faith Promise was pretty close. Love Offering exceeded. I think everything, I don't know if I'm missing anything that I need to point out. I got half my salary last month, which is better than none of my salary, so that is good. Amarin City Toulon, I think all of this looks good. Ministries, fellowship, the only thing we have is the love offering, which would have been, I'm guessing, for the Villettes, the $300 there. And the last page, Mumfords, and all our missionaries, $50 each, as we budget for them. And that is that. So do we have any questions, comments? We are in our last month of this quarter, and so our next quarterly business meeting is coming up here shortly. At some point, I'd like to go over our different policies just as a review. Next week, I guess that's one of the announcements. Next week we hope to be at Mr. Cole's. So next Wednesday, Mr. Cole's. If you bring a card, either before then or with you then, and we'll have some cupcakes or something to eat, simply for his sweet teeth. And when I get him from his room, I'll make sure he has it in.
The teeth, and we won't let him put it in his pocket.
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be next Wednesday, perhaps the following Wednesday, because then we're getting close to the 4th. We may do a brief or whatever discussion on the policy. But we are want to continue on trusting God, and a couple of reviews, I believe, I left on here. The affirmation that is involved: God is trustworthy, I am emotional, or we say God is trustworthy, I am not always, unfortunately. And then the action of casting all of our cares, because He cares for us. We have being in our pitfalls of trust. First one, those good times when the lines are falling onto me in pleasant places. And while we probably don't say, yeah, there's no reason to trust God in this, by our actions, many times we do prove by our actions that we aren't truly trusting in Him. And again, I'll repeat this quote one more time. To the extent to which we genuinely thank God for His blessings He does provide is an indicator of our trust in Him. And boy, when it's hard for us to be seen and acknowledging those good times and His hand in them, to that same extent, is how much we actually are trusting Him. Because we're trusting Him for all, if we're acknowledging Him and trusting Him in those, we'll be very thankful for those times. If we just take them for granted and move right on as kind of the mentality of finally I get a break, finally this is working out, and not acknowledging our God and gratitude for those times, it's proving that our hearts are not trusting in our God, but perhaps in our circumstances. Second pitfall, instruments. Again, not these kind of instruments, but we as channels, as the song I like to sing, the importance of the instruments is certainly repeated throughout the Word of God. The temptation of the instruments is to put our trust in those things instead of in our God, and be reminded of the limit. Not only that we all have limits, but even more specifically, the fact that our God is not limited to us. I'm thankful that He chooses to use us, and what a blessing it is to be able to be used by our God as a channel. But if He can use a mule certainly he can use whatever he wants, whatever he pleases. But what a reminder of the importance that we can have in regards to instruments. Kind of taking the C and the B together. In other words, a physician, to put those 2 points together, a physician may say, I can't do anything. Nothing more that I can do as a channel. I can't, there's nothing that I can do. Well, our God is not restricted to our limitations. He can go beyond that. And just a reminder in that regard. Great to be a channel, great to be a blessing, but you have to be reminded of those limits. Tonight, we want to look at the small things, and I may have at least one that I'm going to add here whenever we get back to this, to add to our chapter. Perhaps not as many as we added in the last chapter, where I added more points than what were actually in the book. But there's at least one more that I want to add to this list of pitfalls. But we look at the small things, and kind of like the thing, similar to when the line is falling onto me in pleasant places, those good times. It's also oftentimes difficult, challenging, a pitfall to truly trust God in those little things, those things that really don't necessarily matter. For a couple of examples, a couple that I thought of, a warning light comes on your dash, and a lot of vehicles these days don't have as many gauges as they once did, so you get the light, and the light doesn't say much other than check engine soon or whatever. And we don't have a lot of gauges anymore to tell us what exactly is going on. So there's that question, what's wrong with my car? What's wrong with my vehicle? And then we get the light checked out. We get the diagnosis codes, and we realize that it's something relatively not that big of a deal. In the one circumstance, had it been a big deal, certainly, especially if we didn't have the resources or the means to take care of that big deal, certainly there is the temptation or the understood temptation to say, Lord, I'm relying on you. We can't do this. I remember when the boys were in college and they had the maroon van, the caravan up at school, and Matt texted me one day and said the engine light is on, and I'm not sure what it's about. And we had already planned on, for some reason, we were going up that direction, so I brought my little code reader and thinking in my mind, we don't have the means to get this fixed. They don't have the means to get this fixed, and yet we have it. It's not at home. If it's at home, you leave it in the driveway until you can. But here it's on campus, and I remember just thinking as we were driving it, this could be just something that is going to be a challenge for us. And I plugged in the code reader when we got there, and it wound up being a oxygen sensor in the exhaust. Pulled it back out and said, yeah, you're good, don't worry about it. And the light is still on in the van, it's still on, it's still lit. And in essence, to one point, this could be a big deal, and I'm going to become really reliant upon my God to fix it. But I will assume that we've all had those circumstances in so many vast areas besides car mechanics where, I can do that one. I can handle that one. This one's not that big of a deal. You suddenly you wake up one morning and you're extremely dizzy. And as I often say, you check WebMD, and you're pretty much only have 3 or 4 hours left to live, and so things seem to be pretty serious. And your heart's crying out to God, Lord, help me, because I don't know that I have much time left on this earth. And you get to the hospital, or you get to the doctor or the hospital, or whatever, and they just tell you that you need to drink some more water, or have some more iron, or whatever it might be. And I can handle it, especially if it needs iron. I can handle that. Doc, let me get this straight. You're telling me I need to go home and have some beef? I can do that. And again, the how our hearts change. The one could have been, and I need the Lord for that, but that's all it is. I've got that. And who are we trusting in? The boss calls us for a special meeting, just us, just you, just me. And our minds race to the conclusion that this is not going to be good. And we get to the meeting and realize that the boss wants us to do a special project for them, and it's actually, or give a promotion or whatever it might be. And, I've got that handled, but it could have been so much worse. What looks like a bill, I don't know how many times I'm sure we've all received that. You get that, what looks like a bill, and it winds up being just an advertisement. Or, cable wants you to go with them, but at first look, it looks like there's a bill, and why are we getting, it's just a dumb advertisement. And your hearts are going to, I don't need to worry about that. And I think a lot of times in our hearts and our minds, we jump too often to the extreme, perhaps ultimately because we maybe haven't learned how to trust God fully in all things, in all scenarios. And we jump to the extreme because our minds are almost as if, God's got that. And I'm going to hope to trust him in that, and we'll see what's going to happen. But in those smaller things, it becomes a little more difficult because we begin to get this is me, and I'm trusting me for this. For the city of Toulon on the board, and it's the same for any board or organization, even as a church. There are times that an expense comes up, an unexpected expense, and the question is, so where's this going to get paid from? What accounts is going to cover this? And in the city of Toulon, we have a TIF district that gets a large chunk of money every year. And it's always one of those things of, and this is usually how it's presented, such and such broke down, it's going to cost us, $75,000 worth to get this replaced or repaired, and immediately everybody's grabbed in the budget, and $75,000, where are we going to get this? And then whoever's presenting it will say, and I think it's all TIF eligible. And all the budgets go down, and we're like, oh, good, we're good with here. There's no problems here. And a lot of times in our actions, by our thinking, by the mental process that takes place in our life, it is a pitfall in those small things. Because we don't have to have reliance and dependence and an urgency on, God, you got to fix this, or God, what are you going to do in this? But it's more about, I got this. I can take care of this. And there's no problems here. And we lose the reality of our God. We lose the reality that our God is still in control. Several points. Go over here quickly. In Luke chapter 16, verse 10, every point here tonight has a different reference, so if you want to turn there, in fact, I need to turn there because I don't have all these written out for me. Luke chapter 16, verse 10, are we reminded of the challenge of our hearts in the small things? What is our thinking? What is our objective? What is our motivation? Where are we going, or who are we going to? Luke chapter 16, verse 10 says this: He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much, and he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. I know that the word, especially in the King James, that is translated there, it mentions the word faithful. And while that is a very closely connected word to trusting our God, the very reality is that faithfulness, learning how to be faithful in the small things, correlates to being faithful in the large things. In other words, if I haven't learned how to trust God in the small things, chances are, while we may have those cries for help in the big things, we can't convince ourselves that I trust Him in the big. It's just a hard one. In other words, we can't really call this a pitfall. As in, big things, no problem. I'll trust God for that. Small things, difficult. So it's hard to trust God in that. Ultimately, what this is saying is we need to check our hearts. We need to examine our hearts. If I'm struggling with the small things, chances are I'm struggling with the big things too. If there is a temptation to run to my own resources in the small things, then certainly in the big things we're doing the same. Now, the very reality, the difference is the big things we quickly realize, this is beyond my means. This is beyond my ability. This is beyond what I can do. But if I'm going to trust me first in the small, when I get to the big, I'm going to be trusting me first as well. The disadvantage the difference is, many times we accomplish the small and have not changed our trust. We're just still trusting in ourselves. Whereas the big things, we realize very quickly that I can't do this. And our trust has got to go somewhere. It's going to go to another one of those channels we looked at last time, or it's going to go to our God as the fulfiller of His promises. Verse 11 says, If therefore ye have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And here we're beginning to separate that which is material to that which is spiritual, that which is eternal compared to that which only has an application for today. And if you have not been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own? No servant, we know this verse, no servant can serve two masters, for either will hate the one and love the other, else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Here we are separating between, in essence, what is often equated as money, finances, material things, versus trusting in our God, and you can't trust in both. You're either going to trust in one or you're going to trust in the other, and in our choosing to trust God, what am I trusting in? Because I can't say, well, I trusted God in the big things, but I'm trusted in something else in the small things. So I'm not really putting trust in both. I'm either putting my trust in me first, or I'm putting my trust in God only. But I can't do both. And so it really, the investigate our heart is kind of a point that, from my own understanding, I got to examine my own heart. If I am struggling with the little things, chances are it's no different than the big things. I'm just coming to the end of myself much quicker and realizing I can't do this. But my trust initially began with me. And it's easy for us to excuse our lack of trust with the small things because, well, we didn't even notice that we were supposed to be reliant upon our God. It just was something that just happened. But examine my heart. Am I truly trusting God at all? To that extent that it's being talked about here. Investigate our hearts. Secondly, Proverbs 5 and 6. We know those verses. You may not need to turn there. We need to investigate our understanding. Simple verse. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not unto thine own understanding. Verse 6. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Just that phrase there at the end of verse 5. Lean not unto thine own understanding. Let me rephrase it this way. Do not trust in that knowledge that already has this all worked out in your minds. Mm-hmm. Don't trust in that thinking that says, I've got this. Don't trust in that mindset that says, oh, this isn't too hard. I can figure this one out. Many times when we think along the lines of our own understanding, we use the word wisdom. I know biblically in spiritual terms, wisdom is different than knowledge. And I imagine we understand that. Wisdom comes from above. Knowledge puffs us up. But a lot of times in our vernacular, we think of trusting our own understanding. And that understanding is the wisdom. And the wisdom that we've gained from life. The wisdom that we've gained from the successes and failures that we've already lived through. The wisdom that we've gained through of education, of a job, of you name it. And a lot of times we look at wisdom. This is great. If I could, I typed this out and then I reread it and I thought that's not a bad statement. If I could, certainly this is not a Bob Jones senior or junior or third or fourth or seventh or however what they're up to now quote, but it is the experience of the past that enables us to face the potholes of today. Sometimes how we define wisdom. My experiences from all that I've lived through is what we then compute as, that's how I can fix the potholes that I have in my life today. Those surprises, those situations in our life that are not good, but I can quickly resolve that. I can take care of that. And that is leaning on my own understanding. It is that which we easily trust, even if that wisdom that we are putting our trust in, even if that understanding that we are putting ourselves in is ultimately just a misspelling or a misdefining of ignorance, if I can use that word. In other words, leaning on our own understanding isn't always the best choice or option. It may be out of complete ignorance. It may be out of complete rebellion. But it is easy to lean on our own understanding. It is easy to trust in what my mind has already figured out to be the course here. It's easy to trust in that which my experience has said, all this has worked in the past, I'll just do that again. There's a lot of times that working on computers has reminded me that experience means nothing. might be able to fix one problem with the computer, and then the next problem seems to be identical. Oh, yeah, I got that, and then I realized, no, it wasn't the same. I'm clueless. I have no idea. I don't know what is causing this problem. And there are times like that, probably in all of our lives, that our understanding of the past is not effectively fulfilling the potholes of today. And we need to stop relying and trusting on my understanding. A car, to use some of our illustrations. Your car is making some funny noises. We bring it to a mechanic. Case in point, one of my coworkers says to me, whenever I turn, there's this really strange, like a knocking noise, like someone's got a hammer and it's pounding on one of the wheels. And I said, well, that could actually be quite a few things just from my limited understanding of auto mechanics. And I said, and it even could be like a bearing going in your tire, which you kind of want to get that taken care of before you're driving on the road and your tire decides to go a different direction than what you're going. It's something that you probably want to take care of. That was several months ago. Like, it was still cold out. Recently I asked, I completely forgot what's up with that tire. Oh, it stopped making the noise. Okay. It works for you. But for the most of us, the car starts making a funny noise. We kind of want to get it checked out. We take it to the mechanic. He goes over from top to bottom. And upon giving us the report at the end of the day, imagine if he said this. Well, I'm just really going to need some time to think this one over. Now, I'm a Christian and I need to pray about this one a little. I'm just not, I'm not sure. Now, could you imagine how often that we would be saying, oh, that sounds like great news. Perfect. We'll bring it back next week. No concerns. No, we'd be a little alarmed. We'd be probably calling up our spouse or family members and saying, you know what, I need to stop at the car dealer on the way home because I think my car is dead. Imagine if your personal physician is a strong believer, and like Joe's dad has a Christian doctor there in Springfield. Imagine you go to get the report of these tests that you've just run, and he comes into the room and he's like, I just need some time to really think about this. I'm just, and he's not saying that he wants to run more tests. It's what we've already done is sufficient. I'm just not sure about. I just need some time, and I need to pray about. Imagine what our hearts would do if we heard that kind of response at the doctor's office. In essence, basically, what I'm trying to point out is in society we are pretty much trained. We're taught. We're I don't want to use the word engineered because that's a very wrong connotation. We're not products of our environment. But in essence, we begin to get molded into this way of thinking that bold and confident is the way to go. If there's a problem, be bold and confident. I can get that fixed. A mechanic may not have a complete idea of what is wrong, but they're going to be bold and confident that, we can get that taken care of. They don't know what they're going to find. But bold and confident. A doctor is going to be bold and confident. They may still change their outcome here as they work their way through some more things, but bold and confidence, we're kind of trained in that regard, that we ought to be bold, we ought to be confident that, to not be bold, to not be confident, constantly be saying, many times won't get us very far in life. But at the same point, the problem is by that way of thinking, we lean too heavily on our own understanding. In fact, if we lean on it at all, we're leaning too heavily on our own understanding. And we need to trust in Him instead of our boldness and confidence in us, in what we can accomplish, what we think we know, what we've learned from, and those experiences of the past that become the potholes of today, fill the potholes of today. Those experiences, and we become confident in those, ultimately is a reality check that I'm not trusting my God as I ought to. I need to trust in Him with all my heart, not leaning on me, not leaning on my understanding, not leaning on my quote-unquote wisdom, my past, but trusting in Him. Now we continue on. avoiding the small things, or let me say it this way, not avoiding the small things, but avoiding the lack of trust in the small things. You need to investigate our heart first. If I'm having a hard time with the little things, chances are I'm having a hard time with the big things. It's a heart problem. It's not a circumstance situation. It's not an environment problem. It's a heart problem. I need to investigate my understanding, remind myself that I should not be leaning on my own understanding. It's part of the American way to be bold and confident, but I need to be bold and confident in my God, not in me, not in all those other channels as well. But we also need to thirdly investigate our options. This is a challenging one in this regard. Ever made a decision but had multiple options and you did a pro and con list? How do we ever make decisions without knowing all of the options? We can almost make this another pitfall all by itself. Pitfall number 3, small things. Pitfall number 4, when there's too many options. And how easy it is to get our mindset into I've got to figure out A, B, C, or D, instead of just trusting in God. You know, I know here in town, we're definitely not the only church. There's 3 other churches here in town, and many other churches here in the county, and within we'll say a 40-minute drive, 45-minute drive, there's quite a lot of churches. And I know that the fact that you are here means that you selected this church over all the other options, at least for tonight. How do we make those decisions when there's lots of options? Speaking of churches and options, when we moved to Greenville, I knew that it was a Bible Belt. I knew it was kind of the buckle of the Bible Belt, and I knew that Bob Jones was obviously right there, and this was a big deal. This was a great place to live. I truly was not prepared for opening up the phone book back in the phone book days. To open up the phone book, and I can't remember how many pages of Baptist churches there were just in Greenville. It seems like it was over 300.
That's the number in my head.
Over 300 Baptist churches, literally with an address of Greenville, South Carolina. 300! How do you pick a church when there's 300 churches? Well, my brother's in-laws went to a church, and it was actually where John Vaughn, if you've heard of him, was the pastor at the time. And obviously I knew of the church, I knew of the pastor, had great respect for both. And so we started going there for quite a couple of months anyway, and really loved the preaching. He was a guy, and I know I don't have a lot of room to talk, but he was an amazing pastor who went forever. And I can't believe it because I know that too many times I go for too long. But this was one of those guys that his messages would last well over an hour, usually like an hour and a half just on the message time. And it was one of those where you're just taking notes. You can't write fast enough. Just write down all these nuggets that he keeps saying. And then he comes to the end and he closes the prayer and you're like, no, stop. Let's keep going. I know it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and my stomach is growling, but I'm not ready for you to stop yet. And that was an amazing part of being in that church, but we quickly realized that, we want to serve. We want to be active, and this is a huge church. I think it was well over 1,000 people. Just a monstrous of a church, but a great, solid, unbelievable church. And another pastor that I had been aware of, I think, just by name anyway, was Mark Minnick. And we only went there, I think, once. Had to go hear him preach and get to meet him. They are a hat church. All the ladies wear hats, and so we came in a little late. I think we had to figure out where the boys went at the time. They were young, where their Sunday schools or whatever were, and so we came to the auditorium late and sat in the back, and all these ladies had these huge hats that I couldn't even see the platform. You just sat back there, and all you see is the hat in front of you, and you lean forward, and the hat 2 seats in front of you is now in the way, and you just finally just give, I'm just here to listen. I can't see a thing but the hat right there. But anyway, we continue to going from church to church, and how do you even narrow down 300? And what was amazing is pretty quickly in our journey, probably about the 7th or 8th church we went to, we realized that literally 2 blocks from our house was a church of about 150. Great pastor, great church, and I think we joined like the very next week. and immediately started serving. And it was a perfect fit. And here we were driving all over Greenville, and literally in our backyard there was an amazing church, Jack Samargo, I think. Did you know him, Joe? Samargo. He had a lawn mowing business as well. Very, very successful. What was that?
Smarga?
Yes. So Samargo, something like that. Yeah, Jack. Anyway, say all that to say this. In 1 Samuel 14, I think I have that reference up there. I saw some of you already turning there. I haven't yet. 1 Samuel chapter 14, we are reminded of the very reality of how God uses, or how God considers our options. How often we look at options differently than our God does. 1 Samuel 14, verse 1. Now it came to pass upon a day that Jonathan the son of Saul said unto the young men that bear his armor, Come, let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side. But he told not his father. It's probably not the best choice, perhaps, not to tell your dad that you're just going to march yourself right into the Philistines' camp. And Saul tarried in the uttermost parts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, which is in the Migron, and the people that were with him were about 600 men. Nahiah the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh, wearing an ephod. The people knew not that Jonathan was gone. Between the passages by which Jonathan sought to go over unto the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp rock on the one side and a sharp rock on the other side. And the name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other was Sina. I'm sure I'm slaughtering the Hebrew here. The forefront of the one was situated northward over against Michmash, and the other southward over against Gibeah. And Jonathan said to the young men that bear his armor, Come, let us go over unto the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us. And then notice this statement, For there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. And his armor bearer said unto him, Do all that is in thine heart. Turn thee, behold, I am with thee according to thy heart. Then said Jonathan, Behold, we will pass over unto these men, and we will discover ourselves unto them. If they say unto us, Tarry until we come to you, then we will stand still in our place, and will not go up unto them. But if they say thus, Come up upon us, or unto us, then we will go up, and the Lord hath delivered them into our hand, and this shall be a sign unto us. I'll stop right there. I was going to read a little farther, but I'll stop right there. And the end of verse 6 again is where I want to point out. Here Jonathan is doing something pretty bold, pretty brave, but his synopsis is this. Dad has no idea. Nobody has any idea what we're doing. But here's the thing with God. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's many or if it's a few. We could come with a mighty army of multiple thousands. Or it could just be you and me. But God is able to do whatever He's going to do regardless of. And I think sometimes when we have those small things, especially when there's a lot of options and circumstances in our way, we have to be reminded that our God is able to do that which we never imagined, regardless of what the options are. If you ever tried to purchase a used vehicle, you know all the options and the this dealership's got this vehicle, it's got so many miles, it's got this amount of rust or no rust on it, and this one over here has got this many miles, and you try to play out all those options and maybe even do a list of what's going to work. And the thing about the thing about autos is this: you can get a car that seems to have very few miles on it, and it's dead the next week. Or you can get a car that's got way too many miles, and that thing just keeps running and running and running and running. But yet in our minds, we begin to play this, I got to figure out what is the best option here with the least amount of mileage, with the least amount of rust, the least amount of use, the least amount of abuse, whatever it might be. And we begin to play out all these options and try to figure, and I think a lot of times in those scenarios of too many options, even if the option is only two, we begin to lose sight of our trust in our God, that He's able to do what He's able to do regardless of what our mind has concluded is the best option. And again, what a reminder of that. Again, Matthew 14, verse 13 through 21, I think I have that reference up there. Gives us the narrative of the feeding of the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Could you imagine I know we know that illustration, but can you imagine in a scenario of our life coming before our God and saying, here's a situation, let's use it in financial terms. I've got this bill for $5,000, and all I've got is $5.02 2 dimes. In our estimation, there's no way this is going to happen. God is a God. Let me read this again. For there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. And to be reminded of that. We could put that in the days of our life, of how many days we have left as far as the doctors are concerned. We could put that into any circumstance. 5 loaves do fish. We could have correlated to so many areas of our life and be reminded that if it were us in that time frame, and I would dare say some of the disciples may have even thought this. What is that? But for so many. How is that an answer to this problem? This little lunch, this sack lunch, is nothing for the masses amount of people that are here. But if we trust God, God is able to save. He's able to deliver. There is no restraint with the Lord. Whether by many or by few, it doesn't matter. Very large, in fact, throughout the nation of Israel's history, very large armies have fallen to much smaller, but as well, much smaller have fallen, obviously, to much larger as well. And God is able to do what He's going to do. Lastly, this is more or less just a point to get us focused on the next chapter, even though I may add an extra lesson to this chapter. We need to investigate our gratitude. Philippians 4:6, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. Again, in those small things, if I am not thankful, if I can't be thankful in those small things, just like we said in the last lesson, then I'm probably not putting my trust in my God. I need to investigate my gratitude, my thankfulness for my God. Again, it's easy to be thankful for God when He does the big things. How many miles have even this year already we've driven? I guess when I think of it, we've made it from coast to coast this year already, in the first half of this year. Heading up to Wisconsin, added a few more miles to our journeys this year. And so many of those trips, we pray always before we head out. And in fact, if you ever see us leaving, which my parents probably have, if you see us leaving, usually right down our road, Jen's leading the entire van in prayer as we literally are beginning our journey. And how many times have we come back, and I say this humbly and honestly, how many times we come back and before we turn the van off say, thank you. Thank you for that safety. We had a ton of traffic coming back from Wisconsin for whatever reason on Monday. And let me just give you a complaint of mine. Impatient drivers is my complaint. I'll cut right to the chase. There was a guy in front, there were a lot of semis, and there was a lot of construction zones. And so the speed limit slows down, and then it speeds back up, and it slows back down, and it speeds back up, and these semis were barely getting close to back up to the highway speed of 70 before it's getting knocked back down to 45. And so there was always a lineup in the right lane of semi after semi after semi after semi. And then what we also found quite annoying as we were going through the mountains, the quote-unquote mountains of North Carolina, is that was happening too with the same thing, construction after construction zone. And you get, the speed limit 70, you get a bunch of semis in a row driving 56. And there's a semi that's like 10 semis back that decides he's going to pass all of them going 57. So here in the left lane, cars are still doing 70, and they're just shooting right past this whole line of semis because we're doing the speed limit. They are not. And then you get this one semi that's going to come over, and his speed increase goes 55, 56, 56 and a half, back to 56. And so then you get this pileup of cars behind. Well, we were in one of those situations on the way back from Wisconsin this weekend. And there was a guy in front of us who was he really should have been arrested. He's one of those extremely impatient. He tried to pass, make a third lane down the middle. And he swerved so that his mirror is almost touching the semi next to him. And he started to speed up, and I literally almost covered my eyes thinking, and I yelled out, "What are you doing?" There's no room for you, stop it! Well, then this guy then he comes back, he realizes that's not going to work. And there's as far as I can see, There's cars in front of us because there's a semi way up there doing 57 miles an hour, passing everybody going 56 miles an hour. And so I can see over the top of this car in front of us that long ways ahead of us is open road, but there's a lot of cars between here and there. Well, after trying the center, he drives into the median, and he speeds up, and he literally goes like door to door with a car in front of us, and then his tail end starts spinning because it's a median. It goes down, and it hadn't been mowed. It was tall grass, and he starts sliding sideways, and I'm slamming on the brakes, and again I'm saying, "What are you doing? You're going to kill us all!" And I can remember finally this guy managed to get, he darted and he was gone. I bet he was doing over 100 miles an hour, and had he stayed still long enough, I would have gotten his license plate and called them in and said, "This guy needs to get taken off the road. He's going to kill somebody." But there are times in those circumstances where, after he got back on the road, and he came back on the road really hard and really fast, and I thought, everybody here on back, we're all going to die. And somehow he maintained control, and he straightened out, and he continued on impatiently following behind the car in front of him. And I remember just in my mind saying, "Thank you, Lord." That was close. He nearly took out us and everybody behind us for quite some time, not including himself as well. And but how many times have we come back from a trip when there's been no excitement and said, "Thank you, Lord." Small things. How many times have we may have gone on a trip of many miles and we come back and we say, "Thank you, Lord," but going to Kiwani, never really acknowledge that. Now we need to investigate our gratitude. If I'm not thankful in everything, it's probably an indication that I'm not trusting Him in everything. And what a challenge. Investigate our heart, our understanding, stop leaning on it, our options. Be reminded that God doesn't need our options. He's not limited by our options. I need to trust Him even in the midst of those options, and investigate our gratitude. Am I being thankful in everything, in all times? Any comments? We'll see if I get to the next one that I want to add here in a couple weeks. Let's close with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you again for who you are. I thank you for just the multiple passages that we're able to hit here tonight, and the challenge of learning how to trust you in the small things. To be humble enough to admit when we aren't trusting you in those small areas, in those small things. And I just pray that you remind us of our truly of our inability to truly guide ourselves by our own understanding. That we truly be reminded of our dependence upon you in all things, of our need to trust in you in all things, and the blessing and joy that we can have when we do. And I pray that you would direct our steps, direct our hearts, and that we be thankful in all things. And we give you the glory for it. In Jesus' name, amen. Sunday, no meal, but we should have extra food back there, if that makes sense. And next Wednesday, Lord willing, we'll like to go to Kiwani and spend some time with Mr. Paul.